Pop quiz. You're walking in town, and a guy with a hacked up haircut calls you over and tells you that he's just come back from heaven, where he's met God. God has revealed to him that he is the younger brother of Jesus, and that he wants you to hack up your hair too, leave your home, swear a vow of celibacy, and try to overthrow the government, because they're demons. What do you do? If you said back away slowly or call Homeland Security, then you're not thinking like a peasant from South China in the 1850s, which, weirdly enough, is what we have to do. Well, if we're historians. Because history, you see, is people. Other people, to be precise. You're never going to understand events bigger than yourself unless you stop thinking, what would I do in that situation? Or even worse, getting all judgy on the people of the past for not knowing how things are going to turn out. To understand history, you have to think like other people, even the folks who fought the Taiping Rebellion, the deadliest civil war of all time. The Taiping was an attempt to turn China into a Christian utopia by overthrowing the Qing dynasty, which ruled what was then the most populous and wealthiest state on earth in the early 19th century. From the time it began in 1850 until it was quelled in 1864, at least 25 million people perished, mostly from starvation, although many of the Taiping leaders, upon seeing that their chance to create a utopia was doomed, chose to enter it just a little bit sooner than average, flinging themselves off the 50-foot high walls of the city of Nanjing. The numbers of Taiping are staggering. It was the second worst war in modern history, deadlier than the Civil War, the Franco-Prussian War, and World War I combined. And the bitter irony is that a population larger than Australia today lost their lives fighting for a Taiping, a Mandarin word that means heavenly peace. To understand Taiping, you must know its people. And this man, Hung Shu-xuan, was at its center. Hong was a would-be Confucian scholar until he flunked 3 consecutive civil servants exams, after which he fell in with a Protestant minister and became homeless. Soon, he began going into ecstatic trances, where he went to heaven and got instructions. In one, a bearded man with a thick belt, whom Hong decided was Jesus, told him that he was Jesus' Chinese brother, that is to say, God's Chinese son, and that his mission was to destroy demons. The demons, Hong decided, were the Qing. In another, he got his revenge on Confucius in 50 Shades of Grey fashion, when he and a crack team of angels trussed up and gagged the Chinese sage and flogged him until he screamed. These visions only seem crazy if you're looking at them with a modern perspective. Seen through the eyes of the kinds of people who would have heard Hong, they make a shrewd, even brilliant sense. Take the man in this picture, the one with the long ponytail. A lot of Westerners mistake that hairstyle, called the Q, for Chinese, but it's not. It's the trademark of the Manchurian nomads who conquered China in 1644 and ruled it as the Qing dynasty. The Qing made every Chinese man wear the Q as a symbol of submission to the Manchurian horse gods. When Hong called these overlords demons, many ethnic Chinese pricked up their ears. And when Hong publicly cut off his Q, an act that carried the death penalty, they picked up their weapons. They became patriotic militias. Then there were peasants, the vast majority of China's population. No one may have ever worked harder than a Chinese peasant in the 1850s. By then, every inch of arable land in the country had been hacked into terraces to feed the country's enormous population. Peasants found themselves pushing wheelbarrows up thousands of feet of hills to eke out an existence which left them no time or money to pursue one of the few paths to advancement under the Qing, passing the Confucian civil servants exams. Known as the ladders to heaven, the civil servants exams took years of study to practice for. They required 100,000 analects to learn, and even then, 19 out of every 20 people who took the exam, including Hong, failed. When Hong told peasants that Confucius was out and Jesus was in, peasants suddenly were given the gift of being released from the toughest exam on earth, and instead given a simpler, far simpler guidebook to learn the New Testament, which Hong very pointedly informed them said that the meek, i.e. them, would inherit the earth, i.e. their farmland. And Hong walked that walk, stripping rich landlords wherever the Taiping conquered, and abolishing private property. Now look at these women. They belong to an ethnic group called the Hakka, and they were Hong's kin. The Hakka lived as a minority group in southern China and stuck together so communally that today they might remind you more of the way bees lived than the way modern families do. Women too, as Hakka women generally had more autonomy and status than much of the rest of Chinese society. You could see how closely they lived by looking at their group village homes seen here in these pictures. These round homes look more like rural spaceships than homes, and here families linked by blood lived and died around a central hub, sharing what little they had. The Hakka responded to Hong's call as kinsmen, but they also responded because his commandment to live as selfless brothers and sisters wasn't a hardship for the Hakka. It's what they did already, every night at dinner. The people of the past were so different from you and me that even celibacy could seem enticing to some of them. Deeply puritanical, Hong ordered strict separation between the sexes, although Hong himself, predictably, kept a harem. The key to the success of this separation was what the alternative to celibacy was, namely marriage. Say you were like this young woman, told to snag a suitable, well-off husband. To do that in China in the 1850s, you would have needed to have attractive, dainty-looking feet, as our young woman does. To make feet look attractive, you were expected to wear attractive, dainty-looking shoes, like these bird shoes here. But since you and nobody else has small enough feet to fit into those shoes, what your mother would do to make you eligible for marriage was take you when you were 8 or 9 and bind your foot by breaking your your 4 toes underneath the ball of your foot, so your foot would grow up and not out. For many young women, the Taiping's call for separation of the sexes and celibacy meant liberation. Liberation from being a cripple and from facing a lifetime of pain. Not surprisingly, many of them became the Taiping's most fervent disciples, some of them forming female battalions of fighters who were among the first and most effective female warriors in modern history. Fueled by such zealous fighters, the Taiping had, by 1853, captured territory that included the most populated areas of southern China, including its biggest city, Nanjing. At its height, more than 30 million people lived under Taiping, far more than the United States of America at that time. And now, you might be able to understand why. You can have a sense of why millions of poor, landless, angry, and dispossessed people might have heard Hong's call and listened. Our great gift as historians is that, by using our skills at research, evidence, and empathy, we can listen to them, the people who listened to Hong. And tell that to the next person who says, you're studying history. What good is that? Because history is people, understanding people. And what government wouldn't find it useful? Someone who could understand the young Westerners now heeding the call of jihadists in the Middle East. What startup company, especially an online video company, wouldn't find useful someone who could understand and get into the heads of its customers and users? It's not just history that's people, it's the world. History is a ticket into that world. What we haven't done so far is understand what turned a heavenly peace into such hellish violence. To understand that, we're going to have to get into the heads of people who weren't Chinese. We're going to have to understand the world through Europeans and their wants. Men like this one, and this one, and this one, which we'll study in the next video.